Hello, friends. Welcome to the Youth Ministry 101 podcast by Net Canada. This is a podcast where you can learn tips and tricks and hear stories of how to reach youth in your life, in your parish, and your youth group. My name is Matthew, and I'm the host, and I'm joined here by Julianna and James. If you guys just want to introduce yourselves, what you do.
Cool. So my name is Julianna. I did Net 2017, 2018, and then I was on staff for like 3 years after that. Currently, I am a full-time student-ish. I work at Starbucks, and I work at Annunciation of the Lord Parish, where James and I did youth ministry, but just doing admin stuff these days. Yeah.
Very cool.
My name's James. I did Net in 2018 to 2019, and then I was on staff from 2019 to 2020 as a youth minister at Annunciation of the Lord, if you didn't guess that. I have a beautiful wife named Maria, and currently I work for a company called Glass Canvas. So we build software tools for the Catholic Church that are built to help a church go from maintenance to mission. So everything is built around doing better ministry. And honestly, I wish that we had it, because it would have made life easier.
True. Cool. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Well, not that specifically. But, we're going to be talking about two things youth ministry won't do. So just clarifying expectations about what youth ministry is meant for. And before we dive into that, I want to give a huge thanks to our supporters. We call them our co-missionaries, for supporting the ministry. If you'd like to become a co-missionary, you can head over to our website at www.netcanada.ca to find out more. Pretty proud of that. Have it memorized now. Let's dive into this topic. So, two things youth ministry won't do. How do you guys feel about this topic?
Really strongly. maybe we can tell the story a little bit, but yeah. So Julianna and I spent a year as youth ministers together, and it was a really, really, really interesting time to be youth ministers, and also kind of cool because most youth ministers aren't doing youth ministry in a team, so that was cool because we had each other, but then we were also plugged into like a bigger team from Net. With other youth ministers on Net staff working in other places. So it was a cool setup, but it was 2019, 2020. So we started the year with about 100 students.
Yep.
Which we graciously inherited from other better youth ministers than us.
They were wonderful.
They were very good. And so we came in, and by the end of the year, we had about 5.
Yeah, that sounds accurate.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 100 to 5. We dropped 95% of our ministry by the end of the year. And COVID happened, and there was a lot. It was hard. And there's some like beautiful stories of God working through it.
Absolutely.
Totally. And yeah, it was cool to be a witness to that. But I kind of view it in my mind as like my failure year, like because like I'd come off of a year of Net, and like as far as like I don't know, this is very prideful of me. This is me coming into my like second year like on staff. I was like, I am the best at youth ministry ever.
I'm in my prime.
In my prime, I'm gonna kill it. I know exactly what to do. So I started pulling out all my tools from the toolbox of my year on the road and just like tanking thing after thing. And it's cool now to be able to talk to Julianna and like we're both working in ministry to some extent now, and to be able to like look back and see like, okay, here are the areas that maybe there was like human error, but also like here are the areas where, and I think it really does come down to this, is like where we could have relied more on the Holy Spirit. So it's like I guess like what makes us experts to talk about this is the fact that like we didn't do great. And like you continued with the ministry afterwards and saw some really beautiful fruit, which is awesome. So that it's not a sad story. But yeah, like I guess we kind of know where not to step.
Yeah, very true. I also think too, we spent a lot of time really analyzing our ministry and really thinking about what can we do? And so I think we did come up with the answer of like, there isn't just one thing that answers everything. And I so wish there was. And if there is, we clearly didn't find it. But But yeah, so I think it was definitely interesting to continue on that process to see what did and didn't work.
Yeah.
And that nothing was the perfect answer that I think that we really wanted or were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have like hours long phone meetings just being like, what do we do?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like there's no perfect formula
No.
because you're working with people.
It's like the most
Yeah.
discouraging answer, and then also at the same time, like the most beautiful. Like,
Very freeing.
yeah, coming to that realization, and it must have been like May or June when we finally realized this.
Right.
There was like, there is no silver bullet answer,
No.
and that felt great.
Yeah. That's gonna be one of the things that we actually talk about.
Would you look at that?
Oh, wow, it's really just hearing it's like you read the notes. So the first thing I do want to touch on is that youth ministry won't be an overnight success, and then it takes time. You guys have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think touching on a little bit of what we walked into when we started youth ministry there was a long history of youth ministers who...
Like I went to that youth ministry when I was a teenager, like had my conversion there.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So, and we walked into Mark Moreau. Am I allowed to name drop?
You are.
Okay.
You're allowed to name drop, shout out.
Shout out to Mark Moreau.
Who had been there for 7 years working in the community at the parish with those youth. Who had really built up a foundation. And then Nick Cummins had taken over from him, who was there for 1.5 years as well. So I think we were set up with youth ministers who had been there for a little bit longer.
We were standing on the shoulders of giants for sure.
Oh yeah, but in more ways than one.
Yeah.
They're both very tall men.
Yeah, literally.
It's like when Julianna first like walked in and the staff saw her, and then like Nick, who's this like super tall, like, you know,
Big guy.
big burly like mountain
Like a
man.
lumberjack.
And then Juliana's like 5
Nothing.
nothing.
Wow.
But yeah, so we were walking into a ministry that was very well established and that had people who were really invested in the ministry. And so we were walking into that, and so it felt almost like it had been an overnight success for us.
Yeah.
Because when we were there, everything was amazing. There was all these people, all these volunteers, all these processes set up for us. And then we realized quickly that takes a lot more time than we had realized, because we were there for a month and things were amazing. But for the case of most youth ministers and for most people, it takes a long time to build up trust with people, because even people who had been there for years, when new people came in, had left. Understandably so, because I think especially in a faith context, right? Like so much of these relationships are built with vulnerability and with trust. Yeah. And as soon as you lose that with somebody, it's easy to not stick around anymore. So I don't blame anybody, because we were these new people who were just taking over and here to like build trust with these people, but they'd already had that with somebody. And so it's easy to think that it was going to be an overnight success for us, because to us, it looked like things had been an overnight success for these previous people. And that obviously isn't the case.
It's like, to use a kind of a net analogy, like I feel like usually the max number of years that you can do on the road is 2 years as a net missionary. And I know people who have had a fantastic first year, and they journey with their team and they get really tight, like really, really tight, and build these amazing relationships. And then they go on to their second year and they're really discouraged. And I think it's because where you end off like your first year isn't where your second year picks up. It's like you have to start from square one all over again and like develop that trust and vulnerability. And I think that was kind of what happens. That is what happens with youth minister transition, or even year to year transition. It's like where you start is not going to be where you ended off. And we just kind of got lucky in the sense that like where we started was kind of where things had left off, but we didn't have the like background relationship to continue that.
Yeah, and like you're speaking in terms of like relationships with the youth and like the volunteers as well.
Yeah, and the parish, like that's a huge. Julianna was really good at that, just like staying behind it every single parish event to do dishes, you know.
Building good relationships.
Yeah, and when you have good relationships with people in the parish, it just like clears the way for your ministry too.
Yeah,
absolutely,
for sure. I want to touch a little bit on like something you guys mentioned, which is like intentionality within relationships, that it can't be rushed or forced. And I think, like, in the topic of being an overnight success, it won't be an overnight success because, like I said before, these are relationships with people. Do you guys have like any stories or anything to say about like that organically building relationships with people?
A lot of the young women that I journeyed with, I think for the first couple of weeks, it was just like a lot of like, complaining about school and like that kind of stuff, which is pretty typical, I'd say. But we definitely got to the point where often like they would come up to me after youth night and just like want to chat. And so we would typically talk about, I don't know, family or boys or that kind of stuff that teenage girls talk about. But it was really, really honoring, I think, to have those discussions with them after youth night, because like we'd spend all this time volunteering together and talking about Jesus and praying together, but to be let in such a personal way in their lives. And that, I think I was very blessed, I think, in the way that they opened up to me so quickly. Like I would say it was probably about November-ish, and we'd been there since the summer. But even then, that still took like months of cooking together and of talking about school.
Just doing life with them.
Exactly, to really build up to that point. Definitely it takes time, and it takes a lot of menial tasks. I think we often forget, like you said, like doing life together, like
washing the dishes.
Washing dishes. Oh my
Things that
goodness,
you don't feel like, it's like you're gonna think that your ministry is gonna happen when you go and like pray over all of your kids and like share the gospel with them, but it's actually like your ministry is happening when you're like cutting vegetables or like washing dishes or taking down sound systems. Like
I think my most meaningful conversations that year happened not in the church, but like 100 meters away in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think that's like a testament to like including them in the process of, you know, the before and after, not just like prepping the show for them and then having them come and then leave after.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And there's some, like, I think that's something very close to the heart of like NET and the ministry that we do, is like, it's community. It's community and it's life lived well. Like we always used to say, like, it's like one of the best parts of a NET retreat is that you get to spend 6 hours with a NET missionary. And I think like that plays out in a youth ministry context too. It's like, not being the greatest preacher in the world isn't gonna matter as much as like how much time are you spending just to like welcome them into your community.
So true.
Yeah.
And James is good at preaching, so that's saying something.
So are you.
What do you guys think are some ideal outcomes of youth ministry?
Ooh.
The big question.
You had a great thing about, you were talking about how we want to give young people the experience of youth group that we never had.
Yeah. I was talking with some friends recently just about, we were just chatting about like what life was like in youth ministry and where people are at now, kind of thing. And it was really interesting because we were talking about how I think often us as leaders, those of us who've been through youth ministry, when we come into these places of leadership, we're like, oh, like I didn't know about personal relationship with Jesus, or like I didn't know about having a prayer life until I became an adult. And so we like want to like give that to these youth, which is obviously so important. But I think almost when we're adults, we're in a place to receive that in a way that we just weren't able to as youth. Because I remember my youth ministry like talking about personal relationship with Jesus and prayer and stuff like that, but just like I just didn't get it.
Yeah, just didn't click. Yeah.
No, and because I cared way too much about my friends or about what people thought of me to really, I think, have that matter.
It's not the questions or the needs that you're grappling with at that point.
No, it's not, unfortunately. And so I think we as leaders want to give that to these youth. And so we like try and we're like, why aren't they praying? Or like, why don't they come to mass? Or why don't they understand the sacraments? But the reality is, and obviously not for all of them and not all of the time, but they just might not be ready for that. And so but we look at the friendships that we developed in youth ministry, and we look at the relationships that we have with the people who are leading us. The experiences that we did have to encounter Jesus and that we did have to encounter community. And I think that I personally really underestimated that in that these relationships where you have at least some semblance of vulnerability, or you're talking about faith, can really play out when you are having these big questions as an adult and you have somewhere to go or you have somebody to talk about them with.
For sure.
Yeah, an underrated value, I think.
Like we used to talk about like metrics, because it's just unavoidable in any kind of professional context. You're looking at like, what are you measuring? And we used to measure growth and like growth, like in numbers or depth. Like we'd be like, has our youth group increased in numbers? And are our young people increasing in depth? And especially the second one seems like it's a really good question to be asking yourself. Like, it's like, oh, that makes sense. Like we want to be deepening their faith lives. And that's true. Like that is something that we want to like shoot at.
Yes.
But like, I almost wonder sometimes looking back if the question should have, because somebody deepening and growing in their faith life ultimately is not something that we're going to make them do. It's something that God is going to like guide them through. And I feel like almost a better question would have been like, do our young people feel like they're part of a family when they walk through the doors of our church? Because that's going to carry on when we're not preaching at them anymore. You know, when they graduate and they're like, where is my community? It's in church. And then they're at a place where they're ready to like try alpha or discovery or something that is going to help them kind of like grapple with those bigger questions.
Absolutely. And again, that's not for all youth. There are youth who are like, and there are youth that we did have that were ready to hear that message and were praying and really cared about these things. But I think, yeah, it is when they do face struggle, are they going to know that the church is going to be there for them?
Yeah.
And are they going to have those people that they can turn to as well, who can bring them to Christ when they can't get there themselves?
It's like so many people, like not just young people, like just people. I think so many people see church as a classroom, like whether it's like CCD or, you know, word study based homilies or, you know, whatever it is like they see it as a place to get like intellectual formation for questions that they don't care about. And and I think it's like we need to start shifting that perception in people's minds. Like the best place to shift that is in youth ministry, really. Like when they're younger, if they look back at their experiences of church as a student and be like, oh yeah, like church wasn't a classroom, it was home.
I can bet that most people who do remember like youth ministry from when they're growing up can like don't remember what they said. It's just like all about how the people made them feel and just like the connection that was made there.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Totally.
So an ideal outcome, it sounds like, would be building like a connection or like a family rather than passing on effectively the charisma and them all understanding it perfectly and having
being able to repeat it back to you in 4 points.
Have you memorized the catechism this week?
Here's your pop quiz. And like, yeah, those things are still important. And
it's not like cut that out of your ministry. Like we
both end.
Yeah.
Because community is going to become empty and inward focused if it's not centered on the gospel. No matter where you are at in your faith journey. Like the charisma and the gospel and Jesus Christ has to be at the center of it.
Absolutely.
But it's almost like we're not going to go about identifying success being like, oh yeah, like they all get it. You know, like it's just more like, oh yeah, like they're part of something here.
Yeah. I can foresee, this is not a really formulated thought, but I can foresee there being like frustrations experienced by some people by not having like a concrete measurement of success. Because like if you go to your priest or whoever your superior is in your parish, if you're a youth minister, and you don't have like concrete reasons for increasing your budget or whatever it is,
right?
The question usually boils down like, as humans, we need like the logic of these like concrete measurements. Sure. So I feel like it could be frustrating for someone listening to this and being like, okay, that's great and all, like building family, but how do you measure that?
Right.
Like, how do you go? What do you suggest for like going about to do that?
Like, are they talking to you? You know, are they talking to each other? Like, I think that's actually a great one. Like a great measurable metric of success is like, are my young people hanging out with each other when I'm not around? And we got a great view of that when we got to go into the high school where a lot of our students were, and just like walking on them eating lunch with their friends from youth group and being like, oh, okay, something is working here, you know?
That's so cool. Very proud moment, I'm sure.
But yeah, I definitely understand the frustration because I think we wrestled with that too of like seeing the numbers drop, right? Because you want to measure it in like, oh, well, if people like it, then they'll come or they'll bring their friends. Which is so it is frustrating, I think, to find that measurement, but it is true, like seeing, or even just like hearing that they're in group chats, you know, or like, and that they're like seeing that they're messaging the group chats even just like outside of when they see each other in person as well,
Yeah.
was also, I think, a really good thing to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to claim, I definitely am not, but I don't want to claim that we're the experts on this subject, but it's
No,
just,
if there's one thing that we're not experts at, it's data analysis for ministry.
yep.
True.
I can connect you with some people if you're looking.
Yep. Some people over at Glass Canvas, maybe. Shameless plug. So the first thing was be an overnight success. The second thing is be a silver bullet solution, which we've talked about a little bit. And yeah, this can be perhaps an uncomfortable conversation to have, whether that's like clarifying expectations with whoever's bringing the youth minister in, or if there's, say, a parish that wants to have a net team in and they're have them in with the expectation it's like they're going to revitalize, like we're going to have a revival and there's going to be 100 people, you know, going to the youth group and the parish is going to be filled.
Yeah.
They're not saying that everyone has that expectation, but there can be like,
It's really easy to think that way.
it's very easy to think that way. Exactly.
Yeah.
So if there are problems like in the parish or school, youth ministry won't necessarily fix these problems.
Yeah.
What are, like, do you guys have any stories of like expectations versus reality of like what youth ministry is and like what it can do?
Yeah, like I think I just want to say before we jump into that, like this is uncomfortable because people especially I think throughout the pandemic, we love silver bullets because it's confidence and it's security, and it ripped the carpet out from under me when I realized that alpha wasn't the answer for everything. And I genuinely thought it was. And I came into an alpha parish that runs a lot of alphas. You're still involved in alpha at the parish.
I am.
And it is really beautiful and like lives are changed. And it is not the answer for everything. And it actually, we tried to do it for our young people and it just didn't hit and I didn't understand. I just thought I was doing alpha wrong. And I like, and I'm like, it's not just alpha. Like there's so many other things, but like it is uncomfortable because it's taking away security, and you know naturally human beings don't like that. So I just want to say that like we might go into some areas that are like, but wait, I thought that was perfect and it's not. You know.
Yeah.
Because wouldn't it be amazing if you could just show the right video or have them read the right Bible passage and then it all worked out?
The one exception is VeggieTales.
Oh, yes, except VeggieTales, of course.
Lots of silly songs with Larry. Come on, that's when the lives are changed.
But yeah, that's not how it works.
Yeah. And I think it's very ironic that like the Lord uses that sense of unsecurity as a way of us taking security in him.
Yeah.
And how we as youth ministers often forget that it's like he's the one in charge. We're not actually the ones making the change.
Yeah.
And so
it's like if you want a silver bullet solution, it's like trust in the Father. Like that really is and like I know it sounds cliche, but it is the silver bullet solution. It's like, do I trust that the Lord has a plan for this and is going to do something? Then whatever he wants is what will happen. And I think it's a silver bullet solution, unquote, because like you don't have any expectations of like what you're going to do and how what you are going to do is going to work. Your only expectation is that God is going to move and that it's going to be in mysterious ways.
Oh. Wow. Mic drop. Yeah.
Tell us your stories, Julianna.
Oh, I was just... What was the question again?
Let me reread it. Like expectations versus reality in youth ministry.
Oh, yes. It was... So James had left after the first year and I stayed on for the second year. And something that I really wrestled with, and I think Mother Teresa got me through this, was like, God doesn't ask us to be successful. He asks us to be faithful. And I loved it so much that I painted it and put it in my office because I needed that reminder every single day I showed up that he he like God, and we were so lucky that Father Rob also didn't have these expectations on us. I think so we were very blessed in that.
Having a pastor that gets that it changes everything.
Absolutely. So we were very blessed in the context of he wasn't expecting, and I remember what did he say to me? He said, he's like, the only two people you really need to impress are God, and that's okay because he already loves you, and me, and I think you're doing a pretty good job. So.
He also said, like, a first youth night, he goes, you know what they say? The best part of the first year of ministry is the second year of ministry.
So we were very blessed in that context, and so I think it was just that quote from Mother Teresa was just a good reminder to me of like, God is not asking me to get 100 kids back in this youth group when that's not even allowed and we're in a lockdown. Because that was the expectation that I had, but he was asking me to be faithful. Like, God was asking me to show up. God was asking me to reach out, even if that meant I didn't get an answer or I didn't get anything. Like, but God was asking me to just keep trying. And even if that meant I didn't see any fruit from that, or I didn't see anything, even if I was just left on red.
All the time.
But yeah, like the reality is that was all that was in my control, was to just keep doing what God asked me to do, to keep doing my job faithfully, to keep trying, to keep praying. And that's what I could do. I couldn't control whether or not 100 people showed, or even I couldn't control if even 10 people showed up.
I think a great example was Night Out.
Sorry, I'm laughing because
it hurts.
Yeah, it does.
I cry laugh.
Wasn't there like a branding guidelines made for that?
Oh yeah.
Oh, so cool.
I made those branding guidelines and I was so proud of that.
In theory,
that's
on
the problem.
Paper.
On paper, it looked
was perfect.
amazing.
So basically, Night Out was in COVID, we were stuck. We had been going to Project YM, which was the big Catholic online youth night at the time, but it wasn't really meeting the needs of our students, and that's fine. It was great for other parishes, but it wasn't working for us. So we were like, we need something different. We were working for Net, so we were like, Net is a great platform for us to try stuff, and so Net gave us the project to kind of develop an online youth night, and so. I remember like sitting in my room one night and I was like, we're going to call it Night Out with Friends because that's so cool. Like, it's a little bit like dorky, but then also like kind of like, oh, like it's like having a night out with your friends, but like online because it's COVID and we're so funny. Ha ha ha. So we like sent it to our designer and he came back with these like sick images and it looked so good. And we had like this format that we were like, this is brilliant. We're like, we're going to get on Instagram live and like, it's going to be like two people having a FaceTime call. And then like the students are going to watch and then we're going to have breaks and they're going to call each other and they're going to do activities. So it's not just a show. They're like engaging in relationship. It was like, it was on paper. It was brilliant.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of the youth ministry experts that we talked to were like, this is great. Like, we can't wait for you to do this. Like, get it off the ground. Actually, it's funny. I was in BC a few weeks ago, and I was at a coffee shop, like a church coffee shop, and the youth minister came in and started talking to somebody. And she looked at me. She's like, "Do I know you?" And I was like, "I don't think so. Like, I've never seen you before." And then I realized I was like, "Oh, you're this church, and you guys were the only parish youth group that came on to Night Out with Friends."
Shout out to Emma Wong for being amazing.
I think she got married, actually.
She did.
Yeah.
Oh, we were right. Steal.
But yeah, like, and I was like, I used to do Night Out, and it was like my like 5 seconds of internet fame. But yeah, so like, but it was one youth group came.
Not even ours.
Not even our own youth group.
Not even in our province.
One youth group from British Columbia, like thousands of kilometers away, was showing up to our online youth night, and nobody came. And we did it every week, and it was a lot of work, and it was really exhausting, and just like nothing ever came out of it. And we were like, this checks all of the theory boxes. Like, this makes perfect sense from a youth ministry theory standpoint. It just wasn't what they needed.
Yeah, and I think that's often our expectation, is to just do what we think is best. And because we're experts, right? Like air quotes on the word experts.
It's like we work for Net. We've been in ministry. We get it. Like,
Yeah, exactly, right? And so
This podcast.
but instead I think we began to finally ask this question of like what are the needs of the people that we're serving. And Night Out with Friends was perfect on paper, but it wasn't the needs of the people. It didn't answer the needs of the people that we were serving, and that's why I don't want to say failed, but
it didn't do what we
Didn't
what we
take
thought
off.
it would. Yeah. And
There we go.
maybe it would have been great at another time for another group of people.
Yep.
You know, like it's like I still don't think that there was anything wrong with the model, but that like the model isn't what's converting people, right?
Yeah, totally. I wanna shout out Face to Face Ministries in Saskatchewan. So they're from my hometown, Saskatoon, and they have figured out, I'm not sure how, but like just a really effective way of doing online youth ministry. And I think my theory is that it's just connection. They've just built these really solid connections with people. And because of that, like everyone wants to come because they want to see their friends online. And like being online sucks and they all know it, but they're all there because they want to be in that community.
Yeah.
And face to face is very good at making it like interactive and fun.
Yeah.
So
Making it face to face, one would say.
They should name their ministry after that.
yeah. So anyways, they do a very
Yeah,
good job.
That's
of that.
awesome.
And even like Net Live is a great example. Like doing net retreats online. Like I know that has been, you know, like online ministry is not easy. I know it's been hard, but I know that like good things have come out of that. And even like the company that I'm working for, Glass Canvas, like we do a lot of work with the Archdiocese of Vancouver and built out this website called Behold. And it's just,
I was on that website like the other day. I was like, this is so good.
it's such a nice, I'm not a designer at all, but I love the way it looks. It's great.
Very nice.
But like the whole thing is built off of this philosophy of like meeting people's felt needs. So it's like all of the categories, all of the articles are all like stories, and it's like talking about not like, you know, how to share the kerygma. It's like, or how to share the gospel message. It's like how to manage family budgeting as a Christian, you know what I mean? Or like how to have deeper relationships as an adult, and like all of that. It's all built around like meeting people in their need, and then transition. Like at Vancouver, there's a lot of alpha and discovery, so it's like transitioning people from like meeting their felt needs to an opportunity where they can have an encounter with Jesus. And that I don't know. I think it takes a lot of things. Like it took a lot of things for me and just like flip them on their head. It's like it's not like what works best in theory. It's like what is going to reach the person in front of me.
I just won't even do this question. What is the current state of youth ministry in Canada / North America?
What a question.
Or what are your opinions on the current state of it?
Do you remember the like one of the last meetings that we had with like the Annunciation staff, and we were talking about with Father Rob. We were like, maybe youth ministry in its current form isn't relevant anymore, or something like that.
Yeah, I think it really depends on where you are, like and what kind of ministry you're doing and who your people are, because I think it does work in a lot of places.
Yeah, no, totally.
Oh yeah, but like what was done for us 5-10 years ago is not what youth need these days.
Yeah.
And I'd say I think the current state of youth ministry is a lot of us, and like I said before, like just us trying to give to other people what we received, but they don't need what we received. They need something different. And
it's like I want to give young people like my Steubenville experience every Friday. Like that was what I wanted to do at youth group. I wanted it to be like big and exciting and showy and have a great band and awesome preaching. And it was like it didn't land. And like it's like now I think the greatest thing about Steubenville isn't like how like flashy and exciting it is. It is exciting and it's great, but I actually think like one of the best parts about Steubenville is that you get to go on a bus with all of your friends and hang out with them for a weekend. I just didn't have that like mindset. And like we talk about like meeting felt needs too. Like I think that the felt need that young people are experiencing almost universally right now is loneliness.
Yeah.
and what we can do as a ministry is as a youth ministry is provide community and like even like there used to be kind of a like don't let them into your life too much kind of philosophy as a youth ministry, and now it's like open the doors and let them into your life and let them see like who you are really, and let them have community with you and with other people and your friends on your team, like all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, and I mean, and then too in the context of that, like when we as leaders are confident in who we are and have the freedom to be ourselves and like have our identity set in Christ, right? Like I think we give space for other people to do that as well. And I think that is ultimately what youth are looking for is to, because so many of them are like, I'm so awkward to like have friends and stuff like that. I'm like, no, like you totally can. And so when we are free to be ourselves, I think we give freedom for youth to do that as well. And ultimately like, yeah,
Totally.
the loneliness thing is huge. And so that's when we can provide that kind of space for youth instead of providing them with whatever we might think that they need instead.
Yeah, like on your second year, Alex, who's a good friend of both of ours, and he was your co-youth minister on the second year.
Yeah.
Alex did something, and when he said he was going to do it, I was kind of like, okay, that sounds fun, but like, is actually anything going to come out of it? But he started a Minecraft server.
A legit Christian Minecraft server.
The meme came to life.
Let's go. Transcending the meme culture.
Yeah, so he created this Minecraft server, and Father Rob, who's the coolest person ever,
No way.
literally learned how to play Minecraft and got really into it. Like I was doing marriage prep with Father Rob because he did our wedding for Maria and I, and like he like called us late once because he was like, sorry, I'm addicted to Minecraft, or like I had this anyway. And I was like, is this even gonna work? And it like took off. Like so many people are on that server and they're like building stuff together and like talking all the time. Like I'm like, there's this like real sense of community that's been built around Minecraft.
Wow.
And the thing that I never ever thought, like I never would have done that. I never would have done that. But he did it, and it's working really well, and it's like meeting felt needs, and it's meeting them where they're at. And really it's like everything that we're talking about that's like working in youth ministry right now, but just like all in one. And yeah, like in some senses, I feel like that's the state of where youth ministry needs to go, right? Like not necessarily you need to start like a 2K server or something, but you know, just like meeting them where they're at and like and building community with them.
What are some experiences that you guys have of seeing youth ministry done well? Like whether that was growing up or that you've seen it before. I know you'd said you were standing on the shoulders of giants, so it sounds like it had been done well before you guys as well. But
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think when I was a youth, I again, kind of something that I touched on was just like, I think my leaders were just really confident in themselves, and they were just so intentional and kind whenever I was there.
You had awesome youth ministers.
Oh my goodness, I did. I really, really did. They were wonderful and just really gave me space to discover who I was and to process things and to not be perfect in my faith as well. And so I think that was a really good example of youth ministry done well, was just there was a lot of freedom, I think, felt in that. Yeah.
There's this really great, I don't know where the stats are originally from, but we saw it in Why Disciples like leadership training series.
Yes. Ooh.
Why Disciples is awesome. It's a great, Net USA puts it together now. It's like a bunch of like faith studies for young people, and they're just so good.
Not a silver bullet, but they're really
Not a
good.
silver bullet, but I would recommend them.
my brother Paul is on the Why Disciple team. Very proud.
Get out.
so cool.
He's on that USA, so shout out to
We're
Paul.
like celebrity. Like it's like you had a viral Lego YouTube channel, but your brother works for Why Disciple.
Big deal. Sorry, continue.
But yeah, so the stat was, I think 100% of young people who stayed in the faith after they graduated youth ministry had 4 to 5 adult mentors. And that's not like, it's not to say 100% of the students who had 4 to 5 young adult mentors stayed in the faith, but the common denominator among young people who stay in the faith was that they had 4 to 5 adult mentors. And we talk a lot about like intentional accompaniment and intentional accompaniment one-on-ones. And something that we kind of noticed as being maybe a little bit of a flaw in that model for youth was that one-on-one is great, but it's not everything. And they actually needed to have interactions across groups of multiple different sizes.
Yeah.
And like thinking back even like on my own life when I was in youth ministry, like Charity, Rob, and Mark, they were the 3 youth ministers of like the main parishes around. And they were so good at creating this like collaborative youth ministry where like you would go to Annunciation or Good Shepherd or DI as your primary youth group, but they would get together every month and do like a joint event. And then whenever there was retreats, we would do it with all 3 of the youth groups in the area.
Cool.
And like we would often go to each other's youth groups just to like see our friends. And so it's like I went to Annunciation, but I had friends at Good Shepherd and I had friends at DI. And then I was also like kind of like pastored by, like Mark was my youth minister, but Charity and Rob also like walked with me. Like Rob worked at the church across the street from my high school, so I'd go have lunch with him. But then I'd go chat with Mark before youth group on Friday, and then Charity was she's psychologist or psychotherapist or
Yes.
Yeah, she's really smart.
Yes.
So if I had like issues, I would be like, Charity, this is what's going on in my life. Like, what do you think? And so yeah, like just like this opportunity for like multiple different people to pour into me and to have an experience of like, I was in like kind of a small group. Like there was a group of guys that we hung out with, but then I had like my broader community of youth group, and then I had the broader community of young people in Ottawa. And then I had really, really close like one-on-one friendships with people. And I think like having that like multifaceted experience of intentional accompaniment was really cool.
That is awesome. And actually that point specifically, like the having mentors, we're going to talk about in another episode as well, so we're going to dive into that a little bit more. I don't really know I don't know which episode this is going to be, so I was going to say in an episode in the future, and I was like, wait, it might have already happened.
Yeah.
So we'll see where it ends up. But yeah, that is a really very key topic to talk about, and I can definitely see it in my own life as well. Yeah, do you guys have any last thoughts about these 2 points? I was going to say as a joke, I was like, well, there's no silver bullet solution unless it's running back to the Father or having Father Rob ourselves as your pastor.
And VeggieTales.
And VeggieTales. 3.
And the chosen.
Yes.
I think my last thought, though, is just like maybe a bit of a word of encouragement to youth ministers out there, because it can be really hard sometimes. And I think now that I'm out of it and I'm not doing youth ministry anymore, I think it's easy to feel like you were just a failure, or that you messed up, or that you just like screwed up these kids' lives and just spent all this money, like, so I know it's very easy to feel like that. But to know that, and I have talked about this with friends a lot, and they're like, 10 years later, I was impacted by something my youth minister said or did, or like 3 years later, like I remembered something that they had, a way that they'd made me feel. And so it's the worst in the idea that you won't see the fruit right now, and that you're not going to get the answers that you're looking for. But I'm still reaping the benefits that my youth ministers had poured into me 5-10 years later, right? And so it might not be right now. It might not be, and it might not be until you're in heaven. But to know that whatever you are doing, like, it's going to have an impact. It is. It truly, truly is. And that's a truth that I think we need to remind ourselves of.
Yeah, I think like to like jump off of that as like a final thought for me, like I think of like I can't remember if it's 1 Corinthians 3:6 or 1 Corinthians 6:3, but it's one of those. And it's like I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth.
Yeah.
And really, like, there were times that we planted seeds, and there were times where like God gave us the opportunity to like water those seeds, but at the end of the day, it was Him. And whatever happened that year, it was His work, and we just got to be part of it, and praise God for that. And I think, like I just like kind of a story. Like I was at church like last Sunday, and I had a little bit of an identity crisis after that year, and I was like, did I really like do anything? Like did I have an impact? Like do these people care? Like, was I a good friend to them, like as a youth coordinator? And it's just like the littlest thing, but I was walking out of mass, and one of the girls that was involved in our like youth ministry, and she was on like our high school leaders team, and she was really great. And she just like, she turned to me and my wife, and she was like, I watched you guys' wedding like on the live stream. And then her mom was like standing beside her, and she was like, yeah, like we all watched your wedding, and it was really beautiful. And we were like, and I was just like, wow, like when I felt like we didn't do enough, or that we didn't try hard enough to like build relationship with these people, and that they weren't still engaged in our church, like here I am bumping into one of my youth at church, and she's remembering that like she watched my wedding and like cared enough to like to be part of that. Yeah, and that was really beautiful. It's like I would never have imagined that when I was there, but God totally worked through it and did really beautiful things that even now we're still seeing fruit of.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's a great spot to end this episode at. Would either of you be interested in ending this episode off with a prayer?
Yeah. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Please pray, come Holy Spirit, and come Lord Jesus.
Lord Jesus.
Almighty God, you are so good. You are, even when we don't understand what you're doing, don't understand the ways that you're working, and don't see it, we know that you have such big plans for the lives of these ministries, the lives of the young people that we're leading, and for the lives of us who are leading them as well. We know that whatever you have in mind is greater than anything we can imagine, so we just want to surrender any expectations that we might have for our ministry and for our youth. Just lay that in your hands, trusting that you are leading, you are guiding, and you are protecting. Just entrust all of this to you and into your most loving arms. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Juliana. I think this is now the prayer seat, because
Oh, is
every
it?
person who's led the prayer sits in that seat. Yep, that is the end of this episode. If you'd like to find out more about our ministry, you can head on over to www.netcanada.ca. You can also follow us on our social media at NetCanada, and you'll find us on all of the social medias. Yes, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you guys next time.